All right, this is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. Mike Reagan, welcome.
Hello. Pleasure to be here, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled to talk to you about your career in music. You're an amazing composer. We go back quite a few years together. You're just an amazing friend. Your evolution from sound designer to composer, the way that you approach your craft is something I think so many people can draw from. And so I'm excited to dig into your process. But I like to start with origin stories first. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, outside of Los Angeles, Van Nuys, and then Mission Hills.
And how did you fall in love with music?
You know, it's funny. I remember being like 2 or 3 years old and putting on albums of like Disney records. So, and also like the Chipmunks records. So like I'd put on Snow White and sing Hi Ho. And we had one of these houses where you could like march around in a circle, you know, around the living room, through the kitchen, through the hallway, the bedrooms, and just keep going through. And I remember back then, even I remember trying to focus on staying in time because like you get close to the bedroom where the record player is and you're like hi ho, right? And then you walk away and you think you're in time and then you come back around and you're, oh gosh, I'm not singing with the record anymore. And I'd keep doing it until I was like I could kind of hear it, but I would make sure I was in sync and like
So
that.
you're trying to keep time to music, and you're how old at this point?
I mean, and that house, well, that was Chandler Boulevard. So that was before Van Nuys. That would have been, I may have been 4 years old, something like
Wow.
that.
A-
Yeah.
And what was the first instrument that you picked up? What did you have in the house?
So nothing at my house, but my grandma on my mom's side, my Nana and Baba's house in Van Nuys, they had a piano. And that's the piano that I have in my house now. We got it redone and totally redone, and it's beautiful. But yeah, it was just we went over to Nana and Baba's house all the time, and I just try to pick out stuff on the piano, and then they got rid of the piano, and then they got a Hammond organ, and that was like a starship because it had all these drawbars, these levers and knobs and tremolo and vibrato and reverb and all this kind of stuff. And that was kind of my introduction to gear, I guess, and like manipulating sounds and making it, make different sounds. And then I did stuff by ear. Even before I picked up guitar, which kind of became my main instrument later, I would just eventually got to like playing guitar and sitting in my bedroom and figuring out chords, John Denver records. There were some Beatles records. There was Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. I'm a 70s
Anything in the
kid.
house that you're just pulling from, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it was frustrating because guitar is a really hard instrument. Like you play a chord and nothing's sounding because every finger is in the way of a string that should be sounding, and it just sounds like trash. But it was a puzzle, and that's kind of I always bring it back to puzzles. Like I loved jigsaw puzzles and then eventually Rubik's cubes and any puzzle that you had to figure out. And music is like a puzzle to me. I hear something, I have to make that kind of thing. And then there's so much to learn going into it that it's this like endless learning experience and I still do it. I still watch tons of YouTube videos but it all started with how do you make this thing that seems impossible?
At some point, are you starting, as you get older, are you looking ahead and trying to figure out how can I keep this going as an adult? What are the types of music jobs available?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great story. So in 7th grade, I was at a school, and one of my classmates was Abe Laboriel Jr., who's the drummer for Paul McCartney for the last, I don't know, 2 decades or something. And he was wearing there's a club in Los Angeles called the Baked Potato on Cahuenga.
Oh yeah.
Famous jazz club. And he was wearing a shirt with the little spud potato character on it. And I remember asking him, what is that? He goes, "Oh, it's a club that my dad works at." And I had never met anybody that that knew anybody who was a professional musician. And so I said, "Oh, your dad works at the club. Was he the manager or because
Yeah.
he's sending you to this school, which is a private school, and so, you know, is that wow, you can pay those fees if you're a manager at a restaurant? Wow, you know." And he's like, "No, he plays bass." And I was completely what the only way to make music that I thought was like anything I saw on MTV or top 10 videos,
Like
or
a band,
like a band
like
or
a
an
rock
artist.
band. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about how stuff was made outside of the stars, And he said, "Oh no, he was, he plays on soundtracks and TV shows and stuff like that." And of course, the first question is, what have I heard, that he's done? And he said, "Oh, well, he played bass on, that TV show Chips from the 80s. He's the bass player for that." And if that said everything I needed to know, because that groove is so sick. And that whole track is meant for the bass. Like that is a great bass jam song, the intro theme to Chips. And so I was just enamored by that. I didn't know it, like, again, doors blew open. Like that's how the sausage is made, and that's how the dough is made, and like that. And then it ended up becoming close with that family and his brother Mateo, who's a fantastic producer and composer in his own right. And Abe Laboriel Sr., bass player, and then Lynn Laboriel, who's a doctor. So I learned a lot through them.
And so when you're in high school and it comes time to figure out what you're doing after, trying to figure out a college, is there any other career path you're considering, or are you all in on music?
I want to be all in. I mean, I was cautioned by family members, to be careful, that's a hard life. And
the backup plan.
Yeah, what's the backup plan?
Right.
Like that. So that's why, like, okay, well, make sure you always have, a backup plan. But I didn't have any other joy. There was nothing else that I could find that was joyful in my life that I would want to pursue and do 40 to 80 hours a week. But my uncle Dale was an inventor. So I remember him, he developed this thing for this company, I think it was called SureFlow, that like he was big into pumps. So he made like pumps for motorhomes and planes, but he also invented the thing that like combines the syrup with the carbonated water in fountain drinks and stuff like that when you go to McDonald's or whatever. And so I just remember going and watching him make stuff like physically with his hands and showing me a demo of why it works. And that was like, but that at that point I was in college at Berklee College of Music and had come back from that. So, but that would have been like, oh, that would be cool to do,
But you didn't, and you ended up going, you said, to Berklee College of Music. Is that in
Boston?
Yeah. Okay. So you're there. So what is that like? Now you're around other people who,
oh man,
right? Like other students that share that love.
It's like the Fame School. Like we grew up there was an 80s show called Fame. And
is that the Irene
Cara song?
I want
to live forever.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was and at Hamilton, that was kind of like the little Fame School. So like, yeah, we'd go and jam at lunch, and we'd break out into song, and the horns would jump in, and somebody would come in and start dancing, and it was like everything but the television cameras are here. It's kind of how it felt, And then Berklee was that way too, but Berklee was at another level because you were at a college where people were coming from all around the world to do what you're doing, to be what to be a musician, to be an artist, to be a bass player, a guitar player, a keyboard player, a composer, a film score person, or whatever. So, and then you kind of learn really quickly where you stack up. So at that point, I just wanted to be Larry Carlton, who's a famous guitar player and a session musician, and played on all the Steely Dan records. And his list is crazy too. And I wanted to be a session player. And also because Abe Laboriel Sr. was a session player, and I was being guided by him. And then I go to Berklee, And then I see these monster guitar players. And had a good feeling like I'm never going to be able to be a shredder, crazy guitar soloist. I'm more of a blues player. I love like David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, and I gravitate towards that stuff. And I'm a good rhythm player, and I have a good feel. But being at Berklee, I quickly learned, oh man, I don't think this is for me. So, and on the advice of Abe Jr., because we went there together, we went to Hamilton together. His family really did kind of help guide. And it became this thing where, well, we're at Berklee, and I was a performance major, like learning how to perform, and it just seemed like it wasn't for me. And Abe Jr.'s comment at the time was, we're at Berklee, they have gear here. They have samplers and computers and keyboards and synthesizers. And so why don't we learn the equipment? And that's where I went nuts. And I just loved the concept of putting things together, putting a puzzle together with all these pieces to create something that just comes out of speakers. And that's all that matters. It's what comes out of the speakers that makes you feel something. And that's the most important part. There's a lot of music that comes out of speakers, but not everything moves you. And so that's how I kind of switched from, hey, I want to be a guitar player, to, like, I can always play guitar, but what if I wrote? And thank God I did, because the way the industry changed, the best way to make a living now is writing for film and TV and video games too. So yeah.
And at the time that you're at the university, are you getting like other musicians coming in to give like talks? Like, who did you see that
Yeah, there'd always be like flyers on the walls, like, this Tuesday, Branford Marsalis is going to come in. And
who's that?
Branford Marsalis is, the Marsalis family is a famous jazz family and New Orleans family. Wynton Marsalis plays trumpet, Delfeo plays trombone, and Branford plays sax. And I knew of Branford only through Sting, because when Sting left the Police, and then he did, I think, the Dream of the Blue Turtles record, and then the Bring on the Night live thing, and I listened to Branford Marsalis' solos, and it was amazing, just how melodic and beautiful his lines were. And it's a good story. Abe Jr. and I were out having some lunch outside at Berklee, and I knew Branford was in town. He was going to do a talk. And he came over, and he recognized Abe Jr. because they knew each other. And then I said to Abe, do you think I could go in and ask him for a lesson? And he's like, yeah, man, go for it. And so I go in, and before Branford is going to order his falafel or whatever, I think it was a Mediterranean joint that we were at. I was like, Mr. Marsalis, I'm a big fan, and I would just love a lesson if you have the time. Like, I would just love it. He goes, I tell you what, he goes, look, come by the room. I'm getting ready. I have a gig tonight or the next night or something, but like, come by. So I came by, and I had my amp on this giant amp on a dolly, and my guitar. I made sure it was in tune. I'm like so excited.
And where are you going to meet him? Where's
at the hotel. He was staying at the hotel that Berklee put him up at.
Okay.
And so he's like, yeah, come on by, and we can play and whatever. So I get there, and he's just getting ready. Like, he's all dressed, and he's like ironing, and and he's like, so what do you want to know? And I'm like, oh God, like, this is not how I thought. Like, I thought we were going to play together, man. Like, show me. So I asked him, he's like, what do you want to know? And I was so nervous. And I said, okay, so on Little Wing, Jimi Hendrix tune, Little Wing, that's on Sting's Nothing Like the Sun record, when you play this line, it goes from B minor to B flat minor to A minor, and you play this line, like, what are you thinking about there? And I'm like I'm just being so left brain about it, And he just said something that just, like, again, blew my mind. He's like, that's not how I think about music. I was like, okay, well, how do you think about music? He goes, all right, look, he goes, when Winton and I were kids, we would sit at the piano and we would sight sing Bach two-part inventions. They wouldn't even like, maybe they'd like check notes to get pitch or something, but like, and Branford doesn't have perfect pitch. You can't play a note and have him say, that's A flat, but he has relative pitch. So if you play a note, and that's what I have, if you play a note and you say that's C, you can play any other note on the keyboard and I can tell you what it is, but I need a reference. And so he told me that, he goes, we would just sing these two-part inventions and we'd hear our voices moving against each other this way and that way. And he was so gracious. And then there was a knock at the door and it was a security detail. And they came to pick him up and Bradford's like, come on. And he let me hang with him backstage and gave me a pass to go back and forth. He was playing with Jeff Tain Watts on drums and Robert Hurst on bass. And it was the most amazing musical thing. And I remember being off stage and he just went for it. And he kind of was doing things that he had talked about at the hotel room. And he says, he does this crazy solo and the place goes nuts. And he walks back and he comes right over to me side stage. And he goes, see what I mean? And I just lost it. You know, like, are you kidding me? Like it was magical. It was magical. And then I went to his talk and, and other people would come. Billy Joel came through.
Oh, wow.
Arif Mardin, who's a famous producer.
What did Billy Joel, did he say anything that you still remember?
All I remember about the Billy Joel thing is that some kid raised his hand and had a question. He was taking questions from the audience and somebody raised his hand and he said, that song, I forget what song he was referring to. He goes, is that song about Christy Brinkley?
Uptown Girl.
But it was like a love song. It wasn't like a fun song. It was some love song. So he was like kind of prying into Billy Joel's like private life. And Billy didn't like that. So Billy like basically told him like, honestly, it's none of your fucking business. And the whole place erupted in laughter. And then the kid like lashed out and screamed something at Billy and walked out. And Billy Joel is, Billy Joel,
Well, okay, that's amazing because not that this would have happened with Billy Joel, but the power of the question. You ask Branford for a lesson.
Yeah.
And you get this whole night's worth of wisdom. Someone else asks, a gossipy question to a musician / celebrity and gets the door shut.
Right. Because if you're there studying, the questions that you ask are things that are more attuned to how it can help you in your unscramble the puzzle, right? And, a question like, I don't know, like, what's your favorite key to play in? Or do keys matter? Or should I focus on this? Or should I focus on that? Like Billy Joel's right in front of you and you're asking him a question like you're from Entertainment Tonight.
Right. About his ex-wife.
Right, exactly.
It's like,
So yeah, but it's really funny that you mentioned that, like the juxtaposition of the Branford, like how I approached him and how this guy approached Billy Joel. Yeah, it's with intention and also I figured I had courage to do it. I asked Abe do you think it'd be cool? Because I needed some help with the encouragement, but like I was gonna do it, and I just figured I'm at Berklee College of Music. I mean, this is where you're either broken in half or you excel. And the way that Lynn Laboriel always explained it to me was it's a microcosm of the real world. Like whatever happens to you at Berklee is kind of indicative of what's going to happen to you in the real world. If you stand out there, you're probably going to stand out as you move out of Berklee and hopefully into a career and things like that. So there were guests like that, but the odd part about the Berklee experience for me was back to like artists coming through the college. There was a flyer on the wall for a sound designer. I had never heard the word sound design ever. And so I went and it was Scott Gershon does this. He came and did this talk and he brought a laser disc because that's how you showed movies back then. He brought a laser disc of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. and he showed this scene where I think one of the kids is riding this giant bumblebee, and the bumblebee's like swooping and doing loops and zooming past the camera. And he goes, "I'm going to play this for you with the sound off because that's how I get it. I get it with the sound off. And I'm curious what you think of it." So he plays the scene. And of course, he said, well, because he said this is how he gets it with the sound off, I'm trying to solve the puzzle in real time watching this 2 or 3 minute scene. And then he turns it off and he goes, "Okay." He goes, "How would you create sounds for that?" Now he's talking to a room full of music kids. There's no sound designer. Nobody goes to Berklee to become a sound person. You go there to be a music person. But Scott went to Berklee and he's musical and he plays guitar and he's this amazing sound designer. So he asked, how would anybody have any ideas? And I just knew. I just threw my hand up and I just said, and he called on me and I said, I would grab a microphone and I would shuffle a deck of playing cards and then I would put that into a sampler and I'd play the original pitch, so it would be like, and I'd loop it, so it'd be, and then I'd play an octave below that, so it would go, right? So it'd be playing half as fast, and then I would use faders, like a stereo set of faders, to like if it's curving right left to right, I would go left fader to right fader, so it would make it go like that, like that. I'd never thought about sound effects ever. But there's a new puzzle. Oh my God. How do I solve this puzzle? And he took me to task and he goes, "Great. What machine are you going to use?" And I said, ASR 10. And he goes, "And Sonic. Very good. Very good." And so we, and then he played his version of how he actually did it. And I forget what I should ask him because we're still in contact, what he used. I think he used motorcycles, like 50cc motorcycles and maybe some jet buys, some whooshes or something like that. And so I talked to him afterwards and he said to me, he goes, how much longer you got here at school? And I said, like another semester. He goes, "Well, I'm starting a new company at Soundalux, and look me up when you get back to Los Angeles." So I packed up. I finished most of that semester. We bugged out, and then I got back home and I started calling him. And so this was a magic moment in my, and I want to say this because to tell people who are aspiring artists in whatever field. So when I came back from Berklee, I was married. I had my daughter. We had our daughter, Erin, at the time, and I had to support a family at a very young age. And we moved back in with my parents, hard to do after like college, right? But we need help and we love them. And so we do that. And then we go down to the welfare line and we apply for welfare and we get welfare. And we're getting like $800 a month from the state while I'm looking for work. And while that's happening, I'm trying to call Scott Gershon every time I think I'm not going to bug him too much "Hey, I'm back in town." He's like, "It's not a good time." Because he's really busy. He's got either James Cameron in his room or John Woo in his room or whoever, right? Oliver Stone. So every time he's like, "Call me Friday. Call him Friday. Sorry, it's not a good time."
Wow.
And he's not being a jerk. He's just really busy. And so I keep calling. And then finally he says, "Yeah, come on down. You just do an interview." So I go down. He asks me some questions. I tell him I have all my own gear, and I guess I answered some questions the right way. And he goes, "Well, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to move your stuff in, I can't pay you because I don't know what you're capable of because you've never done this before. But if you want to move your stuff into Soundalux, let's see what you can do."
Wow.
And I said, yes. So I go home and I pack up all my gear. And that night, the 94 earthquake happens. And thank God all my gear was in boxes. Right. And so I mean, that earthquake was nuts. And we were in the
Devastating.
we were in the San Fernando Valley out here, right? The 14
I remember.
fell down.
Yep. But you were close to, I mean, the epicenter was in like Northridge.
Yeah, and we were 5 miles from that or something.
Wow.
And it horrific, right? And but then, you know, a week goes by and you get your bearings, and then, you know, then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to come in, and I go set up, and they put me up in the accounting floor of Sound Deluxe because A, who's this kid?
Right.
And B, that's like the only room they had.
Like, I'll take it. Doesn't matter.
It was a really nice big room, and they had furniture, and it was like a dream. I couldn't believe it, but I also did not know what I was doing. So the first thing I ever work on is this Nintendo. So Scott was starting a video game company while he was, and commercials while he was doing feature films.
So Sound Deluxe at that time is doing sound design for big feature films.
Every
and
film
he's
you can think of.
expanding.
Yeah.
There's a video game department.
Right.
And here's the kid in accounting.
Right, yeah. Who's the kid in accounting?
Yeah.
So, and I remember, like, I didn't know what I was doing, but just walking through the halls, I met some of the most talented people that were creating the sounds for all the films and editing Foley and cutting dialogue. And I got to see, I was in the inner sanctum of how sound is made for feature films. Even though I was working on video games, but like I would go to all these people's, these amazing creative artists' suites and ask them, hey, I'm looking for a sound, you know, The Pitfall, The Mayan Adventure for Nintendo. Now, sit down. This is a great story, you know.
While they're working on Titanic.
Exactly. So then, so it took me a month to make my first sound effect. Meanwhile, these guys are doing full scenes every day. I'm doing a 2-minute scene today and I'm doing everything in it. No big deal. At 7:00, I'm going home. While I'm like staying late, sometimes sleeping there, trying to figure out how this even works.
So what is that first sound effect?
It's the enemy death sound. So if you play Pitfall, The Mayan Adventure on Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, right? It's when you kill an enemy, and the animation was like it goes bright, and then it like swirls and then disappears, right? And so I kept making all these mistakes, and I just didn't know what I was doing, but I was learning, and then finally, like, it got approved, and Scott liked it. You know, Scott Gerson's my boss now, and so anyway. Then they start paying me, and this is another great moment where Scott's like, well, Scott being a businessman, he's not gonna pay me nothing. I'm gonna start working for him, and he's offered me the job. He goes, we want to start paying you, and I was like, oh my gosh. And he goes, how much do you want to make? I'm like, well, I don't know, you know, and this is how green I was. I said, well, I'm on welfare right now. And I'm getting $800 a month, so it's got to be better than $800 a month.
Wow.
And so he's, you know, at that time, fresh young green kid. I think it was how's $500 a week, and I went, oh my gosh, like I couldn't. That was like crazy money to me back then, you know. And so that was the start of working there. And then I was doing video game stuff, and then I started doing features. The one I'm most proud of that got nominated for Academy Award for sound was for sound editing was Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. And
John Woo. That was a John Woo film.
Yeah. And I got to meet John. I went to the cutting room to watch, you know, one of the first scenes. And I was really moved by it because in that opening scene of Face Off, it's when John Travolta is on the carousel with his son, and he's just holding him, and they're having a great time. And my son had just been born now at this was 96, 97. And then they cut to Nicolas Cage, who pulls this giant shroud, this giant like cloth off his rifle, and he's trying to shoot Sean Archer, played by John Travolta, who's the cop. And he misses and hits his son and kills his son. And I was already missing my kids horribly because this job was hard and it took a lot of hours, not to mention I'm driving in and out of Santa Clarita to Hollywood every day. And I started tearing up in the cutting room and with John Woo and Christian Wagner, who was the picture editor, and Mark Steckinger, who was my sound supervisor. And so what really got me was that the music that they temped in was, while John Travolta was loving his son and they're on the carousel, was Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World." And come on, like
Yeah.
I'm already feeling teary. So anyway, that was kind of what put me on the map as more of like a sound designer for film.
Sometimes you had to, or maybe not had to, but you chose to sleep there.
Yeah, because I mean everyone would leave because they're all seasoned people, and I'm new, but it doesn't mean that they're going to go easy on me. Like they need me to perform, and it's never done until it's good. It's not like it's not like making popsicle sticks where I've made my 200 popsicle sticks and now it's clock out time, right? Does this scene move me or not? Or does this sound move me? And what's hard too is when you're doing like video game sounds, you're listening to the same sound over and over again. Pow, 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 no, pow, pow, no, pow. It can be maddening.
I was going to say, do you ever, in hearing it over and over and over, do you ever, suddenly stop hearing it and you need to take that mental break and walk away? Like it just starts to,
yeah.
you're like, you can't hear it anymore because you've just been hearing it. What do you do
Absolutely.
when that happens?
I would sometimes I'd just go outside, or I'd go up to the 7th floor where all the amazing, talented people were, and just go hang out in the back and watch them edit. I watch Chris Essells, Dino DeMuro, Peter Sullivan, God rest his soul. He's one of my favorite people.
And these are all sound designers
on
and
feature sound
films.
editors. Yeah.
Wow.
From Chris Essells and Dino, I learned that choosing the right sound you don't need a room full of gear to choose the right sound. And so there were people that had tons of gear. There were people that had just a disc recorder, like a Pro Tools or Waveframe back then set up. And just watching them play, like playback stuff for me, and they don't have anything in their room. They're just really, really good. They know that's not the right sound for that. Let me find another sound for that. And they would carve deep carving of sound, and fast. And that was the other thing. I'm just watching how quickly people made decisions and comparing it to how slow it took me to make decisions, because I just don't know. And I remember having this talk with Scott that like I feel like if I just pick a sound, that it's cheating. I feel like I need to make everything. Now that's ego. And that was a big lesson too. Now, Scott didn't say that, but Scott said, if you're choosing the sound, you're choosing the sound. Before you choose the sound's not chosen. So don't be so hard on yourself. Like pat yourself on the back. If you find something that works, that moves you, it doesn't matter if you recorded it or if you created it in some crazy way, or if you just picked a sound out of the library. So it's all those little things that no one's going to teach you any of that stuff. You're going to learn it.
You just have to get in there.
Trial by fire. Yeah, get in there and try. And I drove to Sound Deluxe every day thinking I'm going to get fired, because I knew where I stacked up. And I knew that if I don't start pulling it together, I might get fired, because they're trusting me to deliver, because their clients are trusting them that they're going to deliver. So I had to do things that made my sound supervisors happy because they needed to make their clients happy. And so, yeah, it was like that.
Do you remember what that first Pitfall sound was?
Yeah.
What? Yeah?
Yeah.
How did it sound?
Oh, God. Do I have to do it?
If you want to.
It just, I don't know. Okay, and this is something else I learned from Scott. And Scott said this at that seminar at Berklee. He's like, I make sounds with my mouth, and then learn how to duplicate that in a better way with manipulation of actual sound sources, whatever. So it was like this. In my head, what I heard was it's so silly to do it. When I heard in my head, it was like right. But you notice how there's like a and then a so it's not ow, it's pacow, right? So that's how I heard in my head. I was like pacow, and then or something like that. So you have to break all that down. Like there needs to be some or pop or something before. Okay, what goes ow? Well, anything with a filter. If I take white noise and I take a filter and I go and I sweep it down, it'll go right. It sounds like wind, but so that's how you make that. And then like how do you make? What about him disappearing? And then that became a reverse splash cymbal. So and I took a cymbal and I reversed it, so it went like that, and that was it disappearing into the abyss, and then probably with a little sparkle, like a little chime burst or something like that on the end of it, or something like that.
And okay, that's just, I mean, that blows my mind. Just you hearing you break down such a simple sound effect.
Like I did a Jackie Chan movie called something with Condor in it.
Oh, Operation Condor.
Operation Condor. Thanks.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
It's called Condor.
It's called Condor. And there was a scene where somebody like dropped a bomb into like an elevator shaft. It's kind of like similar to like Die Hard, right? Bomb in an elevator shaft, and then the fire just kind of comes through.
Classic shot we've all seen.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was something like that. So it was fire rushing through an opening. And I had this sample of there was this company called Spectrasonics who made this library called Heart of Africa, and it had percussion, like for making music, percussion, but it also had vocals. And there was this vocal of a guy doing, and I'll do my best impression of that. There's a vocal going, wait, was it? How? No, it was just how. It was how. That's what it was. And so I took the how and I reversed it and lengthened, like stretched it out. So it went like something like that. And then combined that with actual fire. I think I used what was that? A flamethrower, because you still want some fire and gas and swirling kind of stuff, with this. It kind of sounds like that, and so that was like another example of like doing stuff with your mouth and then figuring out, how do you piece that together? So same concept, same kind of approach, but for a film, you have to like piece it.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like story, right? Like, so a story is a bunch of things that in succession, you don't notice that are arcing until you get to an arcing point. And, the energy always has to be going up. You never want to let the people down. And, it's an arc, and it's the same thing with music. When I write music, or when I had done, sound design years ago, it's the same thing. We're making an arc, and we're just supporting the story. The story is king. Like what you do is king. Everything that I do now as a composer, or that I did as a sound person, was just to make sure that vision of that story is clear. I don't want to provide anything that's distracting. And there's times to shine, like, oh, what a cool thing. But nobody ever says, what a cool sound. They'll say, wow, when Iron Man spun and da-da-da, and then that means we're doing our job. And sometimes you disappear. Like you don't want people to recognize you. You want people to recognize the story and the acting and the arc and the performances on screen.
So at this point in Sound Deluxe, you're now in the room with John Woo, people like that. What's your relationship with music? How are you seeing yourself growing in terms of? So
what happened at Sound Deluxe was, so Scott then opened up a music division. And of course I'm like, well, of course I'm going to be that guy, but I had no experience doing that either. I got out of Berklee and became a sound guy. And now he's opening up a music department, and he hired a couple of people who had already done music out of like New York and Toronto. And they showed up, and they had like seedy like Case Logic cases back in the day of like, oh, here's all my jazz stuff I've written. Here's all my rock stuff I've written. Here's all my orchestral stuff I've written. And I haven't completed anything. I wanted to be first a performer, then a producer, songwriter, you know, and then none of that happened immediately. What happened immediately was sound. But then there's an opportunity to, again, another opportunity. So I'm like, can I be this guy? And I learned from the guys that he had brought in, because once again, it's that phrase, you know, where people say, you don't know what's going to happen, but you just got to show up. And thank God I went to a place every day where I had to show up to earn a living as a sound guy initially, but then eventually as a composer.
And so are you trying to angle your way in there now?
Yeah. So I'm like trying to do demos, and they put a demo together and they put some of my tracks on it. And so I'm starting to feel like, hey, I'm kind of
Yeah. And a demo is an audition. It's like an
like
audio.
a demo, so that Soundalux can send the demos out and let people hear the music that they can create, which is me and two other guys. And and so that's when I started to realize, like, oh, I'm holding my own musically for the first time, because I had done only sound since I set out to be a music guy, and then went to sound, and then back to music, and left and right. And so then I scored my first game was Xena, Warrior Princess, and then it was this Disney Villains game where I just decided, nobody asked me to do a song. There was this like dancing clown, and I just thought it'd be funny to do a dancing clown song where there's like a vocal in it, and trying to sound like kind of like, I don't know, 30s, 40s,
Yeah, right.
something like that. And I remember, like, I didn't think, I just thought that was the right choice. And the other composers were like, dude, that's brilliant. And that, starting to hear things like that from people that I respected musically, you just need, you need some pats on the back to know, am I doing this right? I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's just, eventually you have enough of those moments where you stop looking to other people. Is this good? And you start realizing that what you do is good,
Wow. And so now that did you transition fully into doing music full time for Sound Deluxe? What was that like?
Not then. Back then I was composing for video games while I was like doing sound design for like Godzilla and Face Off, and like I was doing kind of double duty off, when there'd be a hiatus on the film for a week, I could jump and do the music composition thing, and then vice versa, and go back and forth. And it was kind of a combination of both things. So I didn't really start doing music full time until I left Sound Deluxe, went out on my own.
And so what was that decision like?
There was like a regime change at Sound Deluxe at the time. These new people came in. They had aligned with other people, and those people really didn't have my back.
And you were there how long at that point?
4 or 5 years.
And you just felt it was time.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah, like
this is the time.
This is not. Yeah, like this is not working for me anymore. And so I left, and then that's when I started hustling. Like, the thing you never had to do at Sound Deluxe was look for a gig. You would show up for work, and they had people that brought in gigs. And that was the big wake up, was going and getting your own work is tireless. I mean, you're trying to find out who's at what company. You're trying to meet them. You're going to game developer conferences. I just focused on video games because I thought it was the closest hanging fruit, similar to what I'd already done. So I could actually have a credits list in that world. And they liked composers that wanted to do video games, because film and TV people wanted nothing to do with video games in the mid 90s.
Yeah. Boy, did that
90s.
change later on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're out there hustling. So what was that first game that really put you on the map? Was it God of War? God of War franchise?
So. Yeah. I mean, it put me, I had already done a lot of stuff for Sony initially. Um, but yeah, that's the one. Here's what's interesting about God of War is that there were a bunch of composers on it. I think there were like 7 of us on the first one, and then there were just 4 of us on the second and third one, I think, and the PSP titles and things like that. But yeah, what was interesting is that just because I did God of War, I didn't mean that the phone was going to start ringing off the hook. And that really blew my mind. Like nobody was trying to get to me and the other guys that did the God of War stuff. We had to still go hustle and be like, I'm the guy. I was one of the God of War brothers. I was one of the God of War composers.
That's a huge credit. But do you feel like at the same time people pigeonhole immediately? Like, oh, you're that guy. I mean, it happens in writing, screenwriting all the time.
Yeah, I don't even think it was a pigeonhole because there were plenty of games that were big action games, you know. But I don't know. I feel like composers are like the unsung heroes behind the scenes. But I swear, we as composers, we are pains in the butt. We do as a group of people try to make it all about us, and it's not. We're there to serve story. Young composers, yeah, maybe you've heard of me. I did blah blah blah, and that might work in a bar, but that's not going to work trying to get that'll get people past the first 10 seconds of meeting you. It lets them know that you're legitimate, but if they don't have an opportunity, they don't have a gig for you, they can't help you. So I tried to be versatile. I tried to be what Abraham Laboriel Sr. was teaching me to be, which is as a musician, you have to be able to cut all the styles. You have to, like, you walk into a session, we're doing a bossa nova today, we're doing a rock tune today, we're doing a pop tune, we're doing a ballad, we're whatever. You have to be fluid. We're doing a samba, we're doing a rumba, and you need to know those styles. You need to know those rhythms, those grooves, that like in the back of your head, you have to know what that feel is. And I didn't go that direction as a player, but as a composer, it was that concept, being able to write music in all these different genres, because it's the best way I could work if you were versatile. If I was only the acoustic guitar guy, I'm not going to get a call to do the blockbuster epic thing. And if I'm the blockbuster epic thing, I'm not going to get a call to do the acoustic thing. But if you can show diversity with your craft, you have a better chance of paying the bills, you know, and not going back on welfare.
Yes.
You know.
So since then you've worked in video games, TV, and film, but I'm curious, how important is silence when you're doing a score? And how afraid of silence are clients?
You know, it's funny, as I kind of went up the lungs of the ladder working with more and more talented people, silence became way more important. Younger creators are nervous about exposing their story or their moments sometimes without music. And they'll use music as a crutch, so they'll want wall-to-wall music everywhere. But the problem with wall-to-wall music is it starts to not mean anything. It's like making gosh, it's so funny how people use food as a metaphor, but it's like when you make a stew, if you go to grab the next ingredient, you don't put the same amount of that in as the previous, and then whatever comes after that. Like, otherwise, no one will never know you put pepper in it if you put so much lemon in it that you can't taste the pepper. And that's what music is too. That's what a mix is. It's trying to, if you have a kick drum and a bass and you turn the bass up too loud and you don't have a way to have that kick drum poke through, then you'll turn the kick drum back up. Well, now you can't hear the bass. Okay, bring the bass up. Well, now you can't hear the kick drum. Bring the kick drum. Right. And pretty soon you got no room for anything else because now it's just kick drum and bass. But where are the vocals? Where are the guitars and the reverbs and the moments and the so yeah, silence is extremely important because what follows the silence will impact you harder than if it was just wall to wall music and then you put this piece in that you really love, but you didn't give people a break. You didn't to make that stand out and to help support that moment.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
So it's something that a lot of younger composers maybe feel that's almost it's a lack of confidence and maybe too vulnerable for them.
Yeah, or composers or directors.
Mm,
Like, oh, what if people think this is boring? Oh, put some music in it. No, the whole point is like your actor should carry that scene. The actor with the birds and the distant traffic. You take stuff out, and all of a sudden you're in their head, And yeah, I think it's really important to just pick, and that's why I love spotting sessions with directors. Is we get to figure out ahead of time what works and what doesn't, and a lot of times the temp score that they put in does a good enough job of like knowing where things go. But there's been plenty of times where I've just said, I don't think we need music here, and it's
it takes confidence to say that.
yeah, and it's better. It's better for if I have more music playing, it's better for me. Like financially, it's better for me on the back end, right? But it's if it's not good for the scene, then then why do it?
You're now fully into video games, and at some point TV comes along and you're doing both.
That was hard because I was doing like God of War and Conan the Barbarian and Wow Wubbzy, which is a preschool show. So I was scoring all those at once. So I was having to
It's polar opposite tones and worlds and even mediums. TV, television and
video games.
Yeah.
And it was hard. So like I had to get into the mood of it. So like on one wall I'd have artwork. I'd always ask people for artwork. So like in the video game world, I was doing the Conan game and I asked for all this artwork and I just one of my walls in my studio plastered it. So that
What was the artwork?
of concept art for the characters and for the lands and the locations and the enemies.
So you're just surrounding yourself with just that world.
Yeah. So Wubbzy, I'm doing preschool stuff and I really enjoyed it. I love working with Bob Boyle.
That was like the beginning of a long collaboration.
Yeah.
That's still going
that
on.
was Wubbzy was 2003 or 2006, I think.
20 years.
Because God of War, I think Wubbzy came out right around the same time. So I'd be working on Wow Wubbzy and doing that. And then, okay, I got to do this. I got to do at least one cue today for Conan. And then I'd look at this wall, be like, God, those characters are so crazy cool looking. And then I would find myself in that world.
Do you ever listen to anything to get you in the
mood?
Oh,
Yeah. I would listen to Basil Polidoros' score from the original Conan film and just to get or watch little scenes, with Arnold and James Earl Jones, and
just to help your mind steer.
Yeah, I'm no longer in this world. I'm in this world now. Go. And that's something that Scott said too when I started working at Sound Deluxe. He goes, this is a job. This is a hard job. You have to show up and be brilliant every day. And that was the conditioning that led me. The conditioning that I learned in the sound world completely parlayed into the music world.
I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the demo process because I remember, and I'd love for you to tell this story of speaking of where you get your inspiration from. There was, I forget what project it was for, but you had told me you did this, finding the right sound. You went to like a junkyard in like the middle of the night to get just the right sound that you were thinking of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
It was either Square Enix or
something like, okay.
I can't remember who it was for.
But they give you art. They give you kind of a prompt.
They give the composers like a packet. Like, here's kind of what we're looking for: unique, crazy sounds that don't sound like the typical thing. And I was like, that sounds interesting, and that somebody actually wants that in a score, and someone's actually thinking that instead of, we don't know, let's see what people come up with. Like, I liked how they had an idea. So Peter Sullivan and Peter Sullivan's he was an amazing recordist and sound designer. And we went out here in Santa Clarita to junkyards, like the middle of the night, or a train yard and a junkyard. And I brought all kinds of drumsticks and metal rods and things to play like a drummer. I didn't want to just like sample like ding and like, oh, I'll build an instrument later. No, I wanted to build grooves. So I had a click track, and Peter would record me, and so I'd start grooving on like a giant cement or metal tube that was, 20 yards long and like 5 feet high or something like that. And we'd like, well, let's mic it from inside. Let's mic it from outside. Let's mic it at the other end.
And is this him saying this as a recordist? Because I'm trying to.
Him and I are trying to come up with like different crazy ways to record sound.
So what is he bringing as a recordist? What does a recordist do?
He knows. First of all, he had a selection of microphones that I do not have, like really awesome vintage mics. He also had a recorder that was, we were on digital at that point. There was people used to record to Nagras, which was like a portable reel-to-reel machine. And those are great for recording guns, and because you'd get like tape compression. The same way you'd want to record a drummer to tape, you'd want to record like guns to tape because it's sharp, transient, sharp sounds, quick, loud sounds. So yeah, he would make sure that I'm not distorting. He would make sure that the right mic for the right sound. He'd come up with concepts. Oh, let me put a lavalier mic in a bottle, and then put the bottle inside this giant tube.
Wow!
And then, he was. I loved him. He was like the outside the box guy, and so I would just groove on things, and then it got scary though, man, because like we clearly were not supposed to be there, and a lot of recording is done kind of renegade this way.
I was going to say, it's like stealing the shot in independent cinema. You just got to get in, permit,
get in, get out.
Get out.
So we were at a rail yard once, and there were like these giant train cars that were built for like filling with cement, like or sand. And so we'd like open up the hatch, and looking down, there was this giant empty metal thing. And so we would lower mics in there, and Peter's like, let's do a stereo one. And I'll lower one down this hatch, and I'll walk across this top of this train and lower one in this other hatch.
So he's miking up
the
train car. Wow.
Yeah. And then I'm playing. He goes, try playing it on the side. He's like, no, that doesn't sound good. Try playing it on the bottom. Oh, that sounds good. Because he's got the headphones on. He's like, oh, that sounds rad. Let's do that. And so I would play all these grooves, like ticka 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 ticka, like, or just boom, or like I'd take my hand and go boom. So that would be like the kick drum kind of, but not a normal kick drum. It'd be like a weird sounding kick drum. And then like someone comes out, there's like this, those like trailers that are on like construction sites. Somebody was there. And somebody walked down and started yelling, screaming, like, get the fuck.
He probably thought he was talking to teenagers messing around.
Yes, and we're in the middle of nowhere in a train yard at midnight. And does this guy have a shotgun? Like, right? But like that's sometimes that stuff is what happens.
But you recorded it. You got it.
Recorded it. We got the hell out of there, and we like running for our lives. Like Peter's like pulling his microphones out of the train, and we're like getting out. And
you woke him up, Moshe.
I probably woke him up. Like, who's playing music in my train yard on my stuff?
Wow.
So I didn't get that gig, but gosh, do I have a great library of instruments that I trigger with keyboards.
I was going to say, because you could use that for anything.
Oh, and I have. I've made instruments out of that stuff.
Is that common?
Oh, yeah. Because you don't let it go to waste. Like, you record stuff that you love, it goes in your library, and you can pull it up at any time for your own, for your next gig.
Okay, wow. And so how much of this is being fed by your background in sound design. I have to think that that gives you a different point of view with just creating music. You know, you have another part of your brain.
I learned so much. I remember Scott, I think, brought in he had a canoe, like a metal canoe, and then we brought in some dry ice, and we would play the canoe with dry ice. Because if you know how dry ice is, it's alive. It's like giving off vapor, right? And if you press the ice, this dry ice with gloves on, against something metal, that metal starts to vibrate and starts to make sounds. So you find different ways to position it to make cool sounds. And then you use those for, I think for that, sound-wise, that was for, maybe it was for Das Boot, the director's cut or the recut, where it was, you know, oh, they're in a submarine and they want to hear like metal ronking and stuff under the, you know, miles below the ocean surface. But it's also, it's a tone. It's a musical note, and it moves and it undulates and it expands and contracts. And so, yeah, you can, I learned a lot from the sound part of it to do music stuff. And same with, and I play different instruments, and like I went to NAMM one year, and I bought this didgeridoo that's like 8-9 feet long. It's a really low tone.
Where did you go?
To NAMM, the National Association of Music Manufacturers. It's every year in Anaheim. It's where all the people that make music gear show their products, and everybody's there, like all the like notable artists and producers, and you'll see Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis there, or you'll see Stevie Wonder goes every year, or you know, stuff like that.
Wow.
And but yeah, so like, you know, it's like, I guess I have a hybrid brain now. It's kind of like it's music and sound. Like, how can I record that didgeridoo? You know, you could just do an undulating tone, or you can do a rhythmic thing with your voice where it's that, you know, it's that wow, 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 wow. But you can do like a groove in whatever key signature you want, whatever time signature you want. You just put a click track on, you do it, and then you can fix little mistakes with science in the computer. And so yeah, and I've also got really into mixing. I love following guys like Andrew Sheps and Manny Marroquin, who's a friend of mine, a mixer.
And help the non-music ear appreciate mixing.
Mixing is what you hear is really the mixer's magic. It's the mixer's doing what I do in music. So a mixer will support, like, what's the artist's performance? What are they trying to say here in this verse and in this chorus and whatever? And it's mixers are telling a story too. So they know when to like make things feel bigger and when to pull back and make things feel more isolated and vulnerable. Their mixers support the artists the way that music and sound supports the story.
So when we as an audience hear something or see a film or play a video game or whatever, this is it goes from, you know, the composer to the mixer, and then it goes out in the world. Right. Essentially, the mixer is the last line of
mixer's
defense.
The last mixering, and then mastering.
Yeah,
mastering is just putting some finishing touches, but there's a lot of mastering that's done in mixing now, and there's a lot of mixing and mastering that's done in composition now. Like, I do a lot of that stuff along the way, and if there's a budget to hire a mixer, I would love to hire a mixer for all my stuff, because they've been doing that gig, mixing music, for 30 years. I've been doing sound design, music composition, arranging, and mixing for 30 years. But they do that one thing, right? So I'd rather go to the people who are the best at what they do and assemble a team like that. But that you can only do that if there's a budget.
Yes.
To do that.
You know, I remember we were on one of our long car rides years ago. I think we might have been on our way to or from maybe Dice or
in
San Francisco.
Okay,
Like
okay.
either DICE in Vegas or GDC in San
Okay.
Francisco, the Game Developers Conference. But it was just you and I in a car, and we were talking about mixing, and the band. There's a band playing in the car. It was not Stevie Nicks.
Fleetwood Mac.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Fleetwood
Yeah, I
Mac.
had the same thing.
And there was a song that was playing, and it was one of their very simple. I think it was off Rumors album. It was one of the most simple songs on that. One of the lines is, "You don't know what it means to win." You know what I'm talking about.
What it means to win. Yeah, that's a Lindsey Buckingham, just him and a guitar. Yeah.
Yes, and you were explaining mixing to me. And we were listening to it, and when Lindsey Buckingham was playing the guitar, and then when the vocals started, you said, "Do you notice how the guitar goes down a little bit?"
Yeah.
And I go, "Oh,
Only if you're paying
yeah."
attention.
And I've heard that song a million times, but it wasn't until you pointed that out that I heard it.
Right.
And that's listening to music.
Right. And that's, gosh, I learned so much from so many people who were so great. Like, and Manny is one of them. And
Who's that?
Manny Marroquin, Marroquin.
A mixer?
Yeah, he's a mixer. Another Hamilton guy I met at Hamilton High School. And he used a concept, he used a term called energy. And that I had never thought of music that way at all. But it was I had questions like, when I had young questions for him years ago of like, well, what the vocal and the this and that, like how come you bring that? Why do you bring down, like in the Lindsey Buckingham thing, right? How come that guitar comes down there? And he goes, and Manny would say for something like that, he would say, because the energy shifts from the guitar intro to the vocal. The vocal becomes the focus and the energy of that verse or that chorus. So the reason why you don't miss the guitar being lowered is because Lindsey's voice is now present. And you have to make room. Everything can't be at the same volume because it'll distort. It'll literally peak.
It's like you're directing
What
the
to listen
ear.
to. That's what mixers do. They show you, they're taking you on a journey. Don't listen to this now, listen to this. But in a way that you never miss what's going away because something else now has your attention.
Right. And hearing you talk about mixing goes back to that music as puzzle that you're talking about, that puzzling it out.
Yeah.
And that's just another part of the puzzle that you came into
It's a
that
different
you're
puzzle.
now.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of work that you've done in your career that maybe people don't know about as much as other credits, but that you're just so proud of?
Oh wow. Probably the anything I've done for One Man Left, those video games.
Okay. And where can you get
love
One Man
those.
Left? That's
Go to onemanleft.com and you can see all of their games that they've done.
and why? Why is that so special to you?
Because I got to do whatever I wanted and they loved it.
So when is doing whatever you want, or that direction of I'll know it when I hear it, not good versus when is it welcomed?
It's never good. Because what that means is I'm going to do 10 versions before you go back to the first version.
Ooh.
And what's your budget?
Right.
How much time am I spending?
Yeah, there's never enough time. The budget is always being cut. Every project.
There's a funny Paul McCartney story when he was working on a video game. Whoever the audio director was, or whoever, maybe not the audio director, maybe it was a director, somebody at some point started giving Paul McCartney notes. And Paul said something very direct but polite. And he said, that sounds, what did he say? That sounds a little too work for hire for me. You're coming to me because I do this thing. You guys figure out how to put it in. Now, that's why it's hard to work with artists. That's why, I think that's why creators appreciate working with a composer who knows how to figure things out. I am a work for hire. All composers are work for hire. We do whatever you want us to do, but you're obviously coming to me because of what I do. If the notes get excessive, then it's just not fun.
Right. And same with writing. You know, you can get noted to death, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, if you know what you want, then like, why am I
Right.
here? Like, if you're gonna write the thing for me,
I want to continue to care
yes.
throughout the whole project.
How has your definition of success evolved over the years?
Oh boy. Success now is not worrying about where the next gig's coming from, and being able to help others, help inspire others, to have a name for yourself, not to prop yourself up with your ego, but to have a name for yourself so that it's easier to get work. Obviously, that's a great one, but it's also you can help other people. You can help motivate, inspire, and talk people down off ledges, you know, when they're thinking, this is just too hard. Abe Sr. said something to me once. I was in Hamilton, and I was trying to learn how to play scales and solo over like I had a guitar solo in one of these shows or one of these band pieces, and a friend of mine at the time who was in the band was like, hey, when this comes around, try this technique or try this scale over this chord. And I was like, oh, okay. But I hadn't practiced it. I thought I did, but I really didn't know it. And so when it came time for me to do that little thing, it was a train wreck. And I looked up, I was already feeling stupid. And then I looked up at him, and he said, or he was just shaking his head. He was just like, and my self-esteem was just crushed. And Abe Jr. and I were carpooling together in and out of Hamilton back then. And so we'd always go back to his house, because I'd drive to his house, and then he would drive us to Hamilton and back. And I asked Abraham Sr. if I could have a moment with him. And he's like, yeah, come in the studio. We'll talk, you know. And I told him what happened. And he said, Michael, if he tells you that, you know, you're not a good guitar player and that you have no business and you don't know what you're doing and like that, that does not mean you're not a good guitar player. And of course, I'm like, well, anyone would say that. Like, of course, I know, you know, right? But then the next thing he said completely changed my perspective on life. The next phrase he said was, and if he tells you that you killed that solo and you did such a great job and you are the best guitar player he's ever heard, that does not mean you're a good guitar player. And then that was just another door.
Wow.
Right? And it was a lesson in don't look for self-worth through the eyes of other people. And that's something that I have struggled with in the past. Less so now, but your self-worth should come from what you give to others, not what people are commenting about something you did for yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, you know, being a composer is not unlike being a screenwriter. There's a lot of similarities in terms of going from gig to gig, and you know, that consistency. You look back and you go, "Oh, I've been kind of consistent for a while," but you don't see that going forward. You don't know what's coming.
Right.
Were there times over the years where you were like, "I don't know if this is gonna"?
Oh man, yeah. There were definitely some hard times.
And how did you stay in the game? How did you stay inspired? What did you tell yourself? Or did you reach out to others?
You know what it was? A combination, you know, get together with a buddy. Let's go commiserate. Let's go grab some clam chowder at Gladstone's when it was opened, you know. Get a change of scenery. Let's go to the beach. Let's go have some, and let's talk about the business and how hard it is. And
remind yourself you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that helps. Ask me the question again.
Well, what you told yourself to just stay in the game, to stay inspired.
You know what it was? I never talked myself out of the dreary. The dreary just lasts for however long it lasts. You know, half a day, a couple days. And then I really miss the craft. I just miss making music.
The work will go up and down, but that love,
Right.
that passion,
Right.
that doesn't go
You've
away.
always had that. You've had that in writing. When like I remember you working on stuff like as you were coming up, before you got gigs as a writer. You loved it so much. It's all you thought about, talked about, and did.
Yeah.
And I saw that in you, and it reminded me of me. Like we can't stop. We can't. It's a love. It's an innate love that you're literally just born with.
This is something I ask every guest. It's called the rule I break. So every industry has rules. Some are there for a reason, and some are just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't believe in or follow?
Boy, that's a great one. You know, there's people use the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none," like it's a bad thing. Everybody wants to be a master of something, you know. But so the general concept is, well, if you do this, then you probably can't do this as well, or if you do that, you can't do that. And I think that's BS. For me, it was BS. I mean, I did sound. I did well at it. You know, people came to me repeatedly to keep doing films, you know, to do sound for films. And then I got into music, and people are coming to me to do music. And I love mixing. Now, I'm not a mixer, you know. It's like I play drums, I'm not a drummer. I mix, but I'm not a mixer. Because I know the level that I would love to engage with people, to have them work with me at their master level, right? But I think that I don't believe in that. I don't believe that if you do one thing, then you can't do another thing, and can't do them both really well. So that's one. The other one is the concept of 10,000 hours. You know, there's that. If you have to put in 10,000 hours before you could be considered good at something. I think it's 10,000 hours to get competent. I think it's another 10,000 hours to get really good. And then I think it's an infinite number of hours till you're dead, that you're constantly pursuing and learning and growing all the time. Somebody asked, Quincy Jones has this story where he says, you know, people ask him, when was it that you arrived? Then you knew that you had arrived. He said, I still haven't. And that's after Thriller and like everything, all the movies that he scored and all the records that he did and the arranging and the playing in a band leader and all that stuff.
You know, on that same topic, Bob Dylan said one time, somebody asked him about the growth of an artist and how do you know, when did you feel like you've arrived? It was that same kind of question. And he said that an artist has to feel like they're in a constant state of becoming.
Yes.
And then if you think that, he goes, you'll sort of be all right.
Oh, man.
Before we go, I like to do a rapid fire round. What was the last book you read?
The last one I started reading was a book that Bob Boyle gave to me for my birthday. I didn't finish it, but it's the last one that I cracked, and it's Daniel Lanois put out a book. Producer, musician, French Canadian, I think. He produced like some amazing U2 records and things like that. But it's talking about like studio tricks and gear, and because I'm just such a nerd for that stuff.
What's a movie you love rewatching?
The Hustler with Paul Newman.
If it wasn't this, what's another career field you could see yourself in?
Something I make with my hands.
Worst piece of advice you've ever received?
This was a business venture I did years ago that did not work out. But it was get all your ducks in a row first, and then you can be creative.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Abe Laboriel Sr. Yeah. Just because someone tells you you're great doesn't mean you are. And obviously when someone tells you you're not, doesn't mean you're not.
This, Mike, this is such a pleasure to talk to you.
I love this, B.
I love you
Thank
so
for
much.
I love you too, man.
And as long as I've known you, there's just so much that I got out of this, and I never heard you talk about music as a puzzle before.
Oh, wow,
which is
funny.
It's just so amazing to me. And so, where can people find you or find your work?
My website, MikeReaganMusic.com, and then or go to IMDb and see the things that I've done on there. I have some stuff on Spotify, but it's kind of sporadic. It's because it all depends on whether or not they choose to release a soundtrack, and often isn't the case. You can go pick up all that the One Man Left scores, because Adam and Alex too. Alex used to be part of it as well, and so hi, Alex Okafor. All of my stuff is on Bandcamp that I've done for One Man Left. If you go to One Man Left at Bandcamp, you can see all that stuff. But I'm happy to say that I'm looking forward, now that the studio is up. I'm looking forward to doing my own projects and not so much waiting for people to call me for work, but to take some time and do some of my own stuff. So hopefully, and also some social media stuff coming up soon that I'll let you know about, and then you can help me get that word out too.
I love it.
Thanks,
I love
brother.
it. Well, Mike, thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me, man.